Welcome to today's podcast, Ruptured Duck, which is exploring disability and accessibility in the arts. I'm Sophie Weaver, and today I'm going to be talking to Mik Scarlet. Now, Mik is a broadcaster, a journalist, an actor, a musician. He's got various hats. Now, before I speak to Mik, let's take a look at him in action. So, Mik, welcome. Now, we've got all of these hats that you've had in the past and present: journalist, actor, musician. We've just seen you being a musician there. That goes back a few years.
Oh, yes.
I think in the early 90s, you were gigging with the music act Freak UK. Great title.
It was, yes. Especially because if you think about the initials, we had a whole range of T-shirts that used that initial to make lots of money. In fact, we had more money from T-shirts than we did from actual band music, but there you go.
Yeah, so with Freak UK, you were quite successful, and you even supported Gary Newman on tour, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Would you like to just tell me a bit about that time and how easy or difficult it was touring as a wheelchair user?
It's funny because it's 30 years ago this year that we did that tour, and that's kind of it struck me because I'm celebrating 40 years as a wheelchair user this year too. So it struck me how new to being a wheelchair user it actually was in my life, and yet I felt like I was completely sorted. And also it's funny how difficult it was. I also tour managed as well as being I was one of them control freak types. Surely not, Mik, you cry. So I did all the managing of the band and I did tour managing. So I booked all the hotels, I arranged all the the equipment and made sure everything was ready and set everything up. So not only did I have to get on and off the stage to perform, but I had to get on and off stage to set up. I had to, I make sure all the hotels were accessible. And I mean, it's really weird to think about a time before the Disability Discrimination Act or the Equality Act. There was no legal requirement for anywhere to be accessible at all.
No, it was just by luck, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
And it was just by luck that the venues that Newman had booked for that tour were accessible-ish, if you know what I mean. Many venues were kind of accessible-ish out front. Some were not quite so accessible out the back. So I remember one gig I think it was in Newcastle that we did, where I could not get backstage. So I basically got changed in the loo and then sat at the bar with all the fans. And then when it was time to come on stage, the fans lifted me aloft and plonked me on the stage. And it was quite a good gig, really, because kind of I think they felt quite connected. But it was, the thing is, it wasn't just the Newman tour. We did back then I really wanted to be a pop star. That was my dream. And we wrote kind of, as you can tell, you've heard it now, folks, sort of synth pop, industrial kind of Depeche Mode, Newman kind of stuff. And this was pre Britpop, so it was deemed to be possibly the next big thing before blimmin' Oasis and flipping Blur came along and ruined it. But the record companies were just completely against the idea of a wheelchair using pop star. They just could not get it. So every time I had a meeting with someone, they'd say, oh, well, would you be at a tour? So I went on tour. Would you be able to go to a recording studio? So I booked one of the most inaccessible recording studios in London, worldwide, which is at Mute Records, which used to be at the top of 6 flights of stairs. So I would crawl up 6 flights of stairs, crawl down 6 flights of stairs. And it was like, so every time anyone said I couldn't do something, I couldn't get a deal because of something I probably couldn't do, I did it. And it became a kind of soul-destroying exercise because every time I proved I could do the thing they said I couldn't do, they then came up with another thing I couldn't do. And this was what was really weird is that tour was alongside filming the second series of Beat That, the kids TV series I was doing at the time. And so I was doing a day's filming in Southampton, getting in my car and driving all over the country to do gigs, finishing my gig and driving all the way back, having about 2 hours sleep, turning up and going, hi kids. And then later on going, pop star, driving. And it was like this weird sort of, kind of hamster wheel. And so it was not only did I prove that I could do all this, but I could also be a TV presenter while being a pop star. And then I went in for a meeting and someone said, well, let's face it, no one's really going to want to put a poster of a guy in a wheelchair on their wall, are they? And I was really upset because that morning I'd been signing posters as kids TV presenter Mik Scarlet of me in a wheelchair kind of going. And like, so it was, basically the industry was really closed-minded, and there was I suppose now it would be called ableist, but I just don't think they could cope with the idea.
Yeah.
It's a very body.
We'll come to how things may have changed, but you mentioned
yes, we may have changed.
Indeed, may or may not. But you mentioned Beat That, which was a Channel 4 program, and that was a huge hit, I believe. Yes, and
no one expected it to be.
However, you had like 2 million viewers a week, which was great, and especially seeing a wheelchair user presenting something like that at that time.
Yeah.
And I believe you were getting, huge acclaim in the newspapers even. And I believe in the press you were labelled as wheelie sexy.
It was really strange. I started doing television by mistake. I was doing a gig in my hometown and the computer that I used to use on stage blew up. Yes, I have a track record with technology, and I fixed it. But I thought, well, I'm in my hometown. It wasn't known for its calm, reserved nature. And so there was a likelihood that I was going to be bottled off stage. So I kind of just told jokes and chatted and fixed it quickly, did a couple of songs, got off and thought, thank God for that's over. And there was a producer in the audience who was on a stag night, who was bored rigid, but had enjoyed me mucking about and said, wow, that was amazing. Basically, you fixed a toaster on stage and didn't get bottled off. Would you like to come for a screen test? Yes. So I started doing a show, and that were in 1988, that was transmitted in sort of 88, 89 for Thames TV, called Help, Roadshow, about green issues, recycling, cycling more, all the stuff that we think of as modern. Yes, I was 23-year-old Mik Scarlet. I wasn't even called Mik Scarlet then, doing TV. And then I went into late night youth because I was young and spunky, and so we talked about sex and drug stuff and things, for the kids.
Well, even as a wheelchair user.
Yeah. Yes.
Wow.
The first documentary I ever made for Channel 4 was called Willing and Able, about disability and sex and how disabled people want and have sex too. And shocking. And it's really freaky for me because, I was 23 then. I'm old enough to be a granddad nearly, and I'm still, you still see the same things being said about disability and sex that I was challenging, when I was young and on the prowl. And it's so I did that. So I was doing late nights, and then someone said, would you like to, we've got this show we think you'd be perfect for. And I was like, yeah, great. It was a kids TV show. And I was like, are you sure? I'm a singer in a band, and I've just done a program about, vibrators and very strange, it was a weird leap for me. And they were like, yeah, you'd be brilliant. So I kind of went along with trepidation, but I met the kids, and the idea was that you got a group of disabled kids and a group of non-disabled kids that had never met, put them together and then challenge them to do something. And they had to make friends and form relationships. And it was kind of it was a really clever idea. Luke Jeans, the guy that came up with it, was a genius, because it was a really great, family-friendly, positive program that kind of really showed that, all this idea that there's some difference between us was rubbish. But the reason why it really worked was because all the disabled kids were like, oh my God, this show's ours because he's one of us. Yeah. And that really worked. So all the disabled kids came out of themselves, they blossomed, and people saw that. So it became a real sort of family favorite. I got loads of letters from grandparents saying it's our favorite thing to do on Sunday, to sit and watch you with our kids, with our grandkids, because it's such a lovely show.
That's incredible. And I think that possibly makes an important point about the non-disabled kids and disabled kids being together. But also you say about the disabled kids were kind of like, yeah, this is great because he's in a wheelchair too. Yeah. And and
it was lovely to watch.
how important do you feel that is even now?
I think,
and whether we have enough of that.
I think that you cannot underestimate how important it is for disabled people to see themselves. I mean, it's really funny the number of people who are now in the media who all say part of the reason why they thought they could do it is because they were watching me. Shannon Murray freely admits she watched me from a hospital bed after just breaking her back, going, well, if he can do it, I can do it. I can get on with life. I interviewed Chris Halpin recently, and I said to him, what made you, from the musician from Dyskinetic, what made you want to be a musician? And he went, watching you on telly. And it was like, this is weird, but that's the important bit, is that, you know, and because I wasn't just a kids TV presenter, I wasn't like your stereotypical person. I was a punk rock, rebellious.
Yeah, it's like, wow, this guy's got spiky hair, he's got leather jacket, he's got studs.
You can do anything.
I remember you too.
You don't have to be normal. You don't have to be, you know, kind of, I mean, you know, later on, the media, after calling me really sexy, came after me because I wasn't the stereotypical kids TV presenter. But I mean, the media always builds you up and then knocks you down. That's part of what they do. But it was sort of, that's why it worked. And it's syndicated globally. So it went to all the English speaking countries first. So the US, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, they all had it. I've got a copy of TV Week from the US with me on the cover, which my mum was like over the moon about, you know, when our family who live in America sent us it, going, oh my God, Mik's a star here. And it was really, because of course they'd seen nothing like it. I mean, we had punk culture and I just happened to be a member of that in a chair, but they'd seen nothing like me. So it was a complete, and I think that's one of the things that's missing now, I feel, is that lots of the people that are presenters now mostly are Paralympians. So it's kind of almost like there's one route in, and they are kind of similar. You know, they might look different, but there's a similar sort of physicality to them. There's, you know, obviously they're Paralympians, they're sporty, they're fit.
Yeah.
You know, I kind of proved you don't have to. If your mum and dad tell you not to do something, then you probably find that someone like Mik has probably done
Absolutely.
it. And kind of and I think that was what was so refreshing, was not only did the disabled kids feel they owned me, that I was one of them, but I was one of them that didn't do things the way they were told they should do it. You knew that if my mum said, don't do that, Mik, I went and did it anyway. And kind of, I mean, actually, I was a bit of a mummy's boy, but that kind of ended once I left home. So kind of, and I think that's really important. And I think that it's something that's missing now. We need, you know, you need heroes, but you also need anti-heroes. You need good role models and you need bad ones. You know, not everyone wants to be, you know, a saint. Some people do want to be sinners. And I think that, you know, we as disabled people never really get the opportunity to have sinning role models, because they're all lovely. I run a medal and I run up this and I climbed a mountain. And it's like, you know, I mean, I got offered a chance to be in the Paralympics in the 90s. And I said, there's no way. If they take a blood test, there's just no bloody way. You know, I was a rock star. I did what rock stars do. And I'm saying no more in case it ends up in court.
I guess what you're saying is there's the wheelchair using superheroes or victims, and there's not much in the middle, is there? It's kind of you're one or the other.
I think
you know, you're either superhero or you're victim.
I mean, the thing is, you can be, I suppose the thing is I was kind of a superhero, but I was an anti-superhero before, you know, we'd got into all that, you know, dark side of Batman and, you know, kind of, do you know what I mean? I mean, I was reading all these comics, so I kind of knew it, but before the media really and the film industry picked up on making superheroes real people, you know, Superman actually having kind of bad side and all this kind of stuff. I strongly believe that. I think that, and I always did it with this thinking that I had, the only role model I had who was disabled was Ian Dury. Right, and Ian Dury kind of led me to become the person I became, really. If you combine Ian Dury and Gary Newman, I hope you got Mik Scarlet. And kind of, because he was, you know, naughty and, you know, he was obviously kind of drinking and other things, and he kind of partied and he sang songs about sex, and he, you know, he was, and yet he was disabled. He was obviously disabled. And I was similar to him. I limped with a caliper and stuff, and it was only like, you know, my spine collapsed when I was 15. So as I was growing up during punk, Ian Dury was basically, he walked like me. He, you know, and I was like, wow, I could be a pop star like him. And so then when I started getting successful, I kind of wanted, people were always going, you know, are you sure that's the right outfit? And I was like, look, I want to be me. One, I didn't want to be a TV presenter. I wanted to be a pop star. So I wasn't going to dress like a, kind of a member of CBBC or, kind of, I'm in the broom cupboard. I've been in the broom cupboard, but all clad in leather while they were all wearing V-neck jumpers and looking very smart. But, kind of, I wanted to be, there was enough good role models because people think there wasn't anyone on telly that was disabled back then. But, there was 1 in 4 on the BBC, same difference on Channel 4, Link on ITV, that were all magazine shows for disabled people that were presented by disabled people, and they were all pretty much kind of disabled presenters. And then I came along and I'm like, yeah, rock and roll, baby, way. And because I didn't want to be presentable, I wanted to be like that because I think, I knew that I didn't want to be like all the normal people, and I know that there were lots of kids that didn't too. I also didn't realize it was going to make me a star within my own community, because I didn't realize that all of my friends from the club scenes that I went out on stayed up to watch it on a Sunday morning and then went to bed. So kind of I'd go to clubs and have all these people go, oh, you were amazing last week. And I'm like, what are you doing awake at 11 o'clock on a Sunday morning? Then I started going raving properly, and then I realized why. And it was kind of one of those things that sort of, so it and they changed their attitudes because they were like, well, one of us is disabled. So, and it was a really friendly, really welcoming place. So it's another reason why I always refuse to norm out, because the alternative scenes, the underground scenes, are the ones where disabled people are just so much more welcome. They didn't care I couldn't walk. They didn't care I couldn't walk. They just only cared my hair was nice. And it's funny. My wife always says, do you know what? It's really funny. All of our friends never talked about you being disabled, but they always said how cool your hair was. And it's kind of, that is the attitude. It wasn't ignored, but it wasn't a big deal. Whereas in casual clubs, it normally was.
Yeah. I mean, you've done a lot. You didn't really want to be a presenter. You wanted to be a pop star, but you've done so much presenting. But there is one particular presenter job that you didn't take on, and I'm curious about that. You were offered Blue Peter.
Yes.
Why didn't you do that one in the end?
If I'm honest,
yeah,
there's lots of, when you do kids TV, you sign a contract that says you won't bring bad publicity to the program. So you kind of you film it, and you've got to be a saint. Then you've got to be a saint between the filming and the transmission. Then you've got to be a saint for the transmission. And then for about 3 months of the year, when it's on a annual kind of thing like I was, you can go mad. I did. So all my live gigs were there and everything was, yeah, and I just went, woohoo, and then, there might be a new series, I better calm down. But there's still this kind of witch hunt by the media to find you doing naughty things, and I used to go clubbing, and I'd be in clubs and I'd see the journalists that I'd met like talking to me about being Mik Scarlet superstar, really sexy, and know that they were on the prowl looking for people to out and sort of people to tell stories about. And I knew that it would and Blue Peter has the track record of being one of those shows where the journalists just go for you. And, as I said, I've always said to everyone, I'm not a kids TV presenter. I'm a pop star that just happened to present kids TV. I wanted to be a rock star. I wanted to be a musician. And I did all the things that they do. And I didn't do all the things that kids TV presenters do. And one of the big ones they do is keep lots of secrets. And I didn't. I was open about me. I've always been truthful about me. And I think that it just struck me that I know, had I have gone into Blue Peter, my life would have been a constant battle to be who I am, because there would have been journalists after me all the while. And if you think about the history of Blue Peter presenters, so many have had their lives ruined because, oh, well, he did that, or she did this, or they went there. And I wasn't prepared to do that, I look back on some, I turned down lots of really amazing opportunities because they might get in the way of me having a good time. One of the things is I was absolutely sure that I'd be dead by 35. Everyone was sure that, your condition, you'll be dead, you won't survive. So I lived at full speed, just thinking, right, I'm gonna have as much fun as I can before I go. And then suddenly I hit 35 and then thought, oh shit. And now I'm 55. I look back on the things I said no to and think, that was a bit silly, wasn't it? But yeah, Blue Peter was one of those ones that I just thought, it's a great opportunity, but it's just not worth the effort.
But
what was really sad was I suggested other people for it, other disabled presenters. But back then I didn't realize that it was me they wanted. You know, I was still under that impression that, oh, they want someone disabled. Oh, I know a great disabled presenter. And then they did to them what the music industry did to me. Oh, but can you climb a thing, and can you do this, and will you be able to, you know, abseil down a building? Whereas, of course, they knew I could, because I'd done all that stupid stuff.
I'll let you into a little secret. I always wanted to be a Blue Peter presenter. It was on my wish list. And sadly, it never happened. And I don't think my disability is so much of a problem now as a wheelchair user. I think it's more my age. I'm probably too old, because they're really young.
Oh yeah, no. I mean, I when I hit 30, you know, it was I mean, if I hadn't have had the expose about my going to strange clubs and wearing leather trousers, I would have been not a kids TV presenter by now anyway, because you know, by then, because I was too old. I mean, it's funny as well, because it used to be that youth television, like young people's television, ended at the age of 30. You were considered young at 30. Can you imagine BBC Three making shows for 30-year-olds? But that was young back then. So then I kind of, obviously that happened, and I stopped being a kids TV presenter and moved into more factual. I've been working on 1 in 4, which was the From the Edge, which was the new disability magazine show. But then I became like a regular there, and that's where I really enjoyed that, to be honest. It wasn't always fun, because, you know, it was quite a heavy schedule, and I was their action cripple, as they called me. So it meant that every time they found something where I could jump off something, under something, or over something, I got the job. But it taught me a lot. It's where I learned about the social model. It's where I learned to understand that we might have different impairments, but we share so much. And it also got me really interested in campaigning for other people, because I met people that were having a much worse time of it, you know, and that stayed with me. I also met some amazing people and had some really great fun, because, you know, working in a department where everybody's disabled, you know, the researchers, the runners, the directors, the producers, the editors, the series, everybody, it meant that there was this real camaraderie. We were meant to go off into the mainstream.
Outside of presenting, you've done a lot of other work, including loads of first. You were one of the first, or the first, disabled actor to appear in a UK soap, or continuing drama series, as they like to be called, which at the time was Brookside. And you also then appeared on The Bill and in 2.4 Children. Can you just tell us what was it like being on set and acting on those iconic shows? Anyone that's ever seen, if anyone actually saw any of my early acting, will freely agree with me when I say I'm not really an actor. I joined Equity because you couldn't be on telly back then if you weren't in Equity. You couldn't present, you couldn't do anything, because it was a closed shop. So I joined Equity through being in a band. Bizarrely, they also counted that as being a performer. So I joined Equity, and that meant I was the youngest person in Equity. So when disabled wheelchair user in Equity was like, everyone else was old and then me. So if you wanted a young person in your story, and there was this drive back then to get real disabled people involved, they basically had me or no one else. So I didn't get the part through talent. I got the part through being the only one there. But yeah, so Brookside is a perfect example of a character that was meant to be possibly a returning character, who once had seen me act went, nah, I'll do, just one will do. But yeah, so, and it was weird because they made the set fully accessible and everything was great, and then they never had anyone else back, and kind of, it was just really weird. 2.4 Children was lovely, really lovely gang, really lovely thing to film, quite funny. Ironically, if you watch it back, it is repeated on Gold. As I go through the door, I trip over a lead, which is why I fluffed my first line, but they left it in, and I was like, everyone else gets to do retakes, why can't I? But again, basically I was cast as me, because basically I'm there in a Sheep on Drugs t-shirt with spiky hair, which was a band I really liked. And then in The Bill, I played record store owner James Morrison. That's an interesting name, isn't it? Jim. Anyway, it's Riders on the Storm. And so I was, and basically, again, basically me saying lines. Then I started thinking, oh, maybe I should do more acting. So I did some training with Grey Eye, diddly-dee. And then it started getting really depressing, because all the roles I got sent for were wheelchair user, depressed,
I'm not a man anymore. Why don't you leave me, darling? Now I'm not a man. Go and find a real man that can pleasure you the way a man should, kind of, or, you know, I'm committing suicide because I can't cope with being disabled. It was the same character pretty much in a different drama. And I got really bored of it. And it kind of, in the end, it broke when I got offered a part I went to read for a film, and the character I was playing was the fun guy in hospital. There's always a fun guy in hospital. And so it was quite, yeah, I get this, I get that. And then, reading through the script, and my last scene is me jumping off the roof of the hospital because I can't take life as a disabled person. It's a fun guy, but also depressed. And I went to the reading and I said, who wrote this rubbish? And this little voice went, I did. And I said, you do know they don't do lifts to hospital roofs to prevent people from jumping.
I was just going to say, how did you get up there?
Exactly.
In the first place,
and it was, and he was like, oh, it's based on real life, but he jumped off a garage in his hometown. I said, well, just put that in then. It's only one extra scene. I mean, see you guys, I'm going home now. Cut to a scene of him, like 10 seconds, 20 seconds of him sitting surrounded by rubbish, crying, and then another scene of him jumping off a car park. And then it's real. And they didn't get me to do it, but they did get a non-disabled actor, and then they followed my idea, and that's exactly how they did this story. That was the thing that kind of made me go, oh, I've had enough of this. So I stopped acting for years. I've got back into it recently. I've done some more training and done some stuff on stage, and that was great. Stage acting is wonderful. I've not done it before. I've done TV, and it's like there's no response, and then suddenly you're in a room where people react. You're like, oh, I love this. This feeds my ego much better than television. And also, if you get it wrong, you could just fluff it and hope that everyone else goes with you. So it's great because I've never been able to remember lines. Oh, dear. But yeah, no, I mean,
so more recently, you've been doing more presenting and stuff. Would you say there's differences now from back then? And you're doing more mainstream stuff, I think. And I just want to look at how important is it that you're a disabled person doing mainstream presenting rather than for disabled people?
I mean, it's funny.
How far do you think things have come?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not entirely sure that I've been blacklisted because my career keeps kind of getting to a point where it should happen, and then boom, like, about 5 years ago, I started getting back on telly a lot. And I was doing news reporting for Channel 5 News. I was on Sky a lot. And then the same happened. I was on The Right Stuff regularly, going on that, and then recently I did some stuff on Front Row and on Times Radio. And again, I mean, it might be that I am very outspoken. I am left wing, and let's face it, that's not fashionable at the moment. I think the thing is there's still this attitude that disabled people should be like everybody. So there's an everyman attitude, and you can be a bit different, but you can't be too different. And so and the some of the disabled people that we think about that are on screen now, they are quite normal. They're quite acceptable. Whereas I'm not.
So there's a bit of, yeah. So, and I think I agree with you that I feel sometimes it's very much the more acceptable side of disability that is still shown on TV.
Yeah, I think one of the things I think they think is I want my money's worth. So if you're getting, so I trained to be a weather presenter, and basically was told you're great at what you do, but look at the state of you. You're definitely not BBC News material looking like that. And it was like, one, why? But two, I wouldn't dress like this on BBC News, but I'm not going to change the way I dress unless I've got a job on BBC News, because then I'm not me for the other jobs I've gone for, but I think that they want to make sure they're getting their money's worth. So you tend to find that people are obviously disabled, but are also quite easy or prepared to put themselves out to do the work. I'll never forget watching an outtake of Addy when Addy was doing Addy Does Africa, and he's on top of this.
Addy a Deputan.
He's wheeling along, doing a piece to camera, and then he falls out of his chair, and he rolls along, and you watch it, and you go, "Oh my god!" And the camera runs up to him to see if he's all right, and he's on the edge of a cliff.
Oh my god!
It's like he's about that far from plummeting to his death, and he was pulling a wheelie on a mountain by a cliff because it looked good, and it's sort of those are the people that still get on. I refuse to endanger my life for a TV show, for it is only television. It is not brain surgery. So, and I think that that's another thing. I am known for being someone that will go, that's not right, you shouldn't do that. Because, you know, the other half of my career, working in equality and the public sector and that kind of thing, the BBC especially is a public sector broadcaster. It's a public body, so it has legal responsibilities to make sure that it doesn't drop its disabled presenters off mountains.
Yes.
Most channels do, I'd find. And I think that, you know, so there is that. But I think, I mean, to be honest, it's just we talk about things getting better and there's more people again. You know, we've kind of gone back to where we were when I was on. You know, there was quite a few of us back in the 90s. People don't remember, but you know, there was Matt, there was Julie Fernandez, there was you know, again, I always think it's funny that you can name them, you can count them. You know, even now you can count them on your fingers, and it's like, if you can do that, there's not enough, because we are 20% of the population. The music industry is even funnier, because there are loads of disabled musicians, but they don't come out because they have invisible impairments, and everyone's like, it's a bit like being gay was, you know, years ago. It's kind of changed. It's still quite bad, but it's changing now. Being disabled is still considered a career killer. So there are loads of people I know who are part of our community, who are in the music industry, are really famous, but won't admit to it because they think it might impact on the way their fans see them, and their managers are like, no. And I think that telly is the same. There are quite a few people that have invisible impairments that aren't championed, and I think they think it's because it will impact their career. And I think that that's another thing the industry has to do. It has to make sure, all industries have to start supporting disabled people, whether you can see they're disabled or not, to be proud, to be supportive, to get the help they need, to give the best that they can give. And also to tell everybody, I'm a huge believer that like we said at the start, people want to see themselves. If you are, you know, autistic, or if you are, you know, you've got diabetes or something, you want to know that there are people like you in the industry. It shouldn't be, you know, hello, I'm a wheelchair user. Hello, I have limb difference. Hello, I'm visually impaired. Hello, I'm hearing impaired. They're the ones you see a lot. But there are loads of other people in our community that just kind of, and if they do mention it, it's almost like that's the point, you know. Hello, I am this, and now and it's like, no. The other thing I really find frustrating is the fact that we see a lot of documentaries now about disabled people, and they're not for us, they're for the general public, and it's explaining a condition, an illness, an impairment, and it's not talking about, to us, hello, I'm disabled, so are you. Anyway, we don't need to tell you about that, because you know what it's like. But let's talk about stuff you can do, stuff you can't do, political stuff, like the stuff I used to do with From the Edge. There's none of that. There's nothing at all for us. And I think that's really troubling. I get so bored of seeing, oh, tonight we've got a documentary about a disabled person, and then all they do is kind of talk about what bits of themselves don't work. It's like, well, that's not about us, that's about that person individually. And it's about, hello everybody, you haven't got this thing, but this person has got this thing, and so he's going to tell you all about this thing. And it's like, well, that's not what we want to see. We want to see ourselves, but we don't want to see illness and impairment.
So we're fast running out of time here. But I would like to ask you, you know, over this period of time, whatever that is now, number of years, what do you see as positive about the arts industry now, and how do you see it all moving forward in a positive way, and where you think it needs to be going? I
think we are at a turning point at the moment. Throughout the media, the arts, the entire culture sector, there is a realization that it hasn't been representative of anybody. I mean, you know, of all of the protected characteristics haven't really been breaking through. So there's a huge push. And we as disabled people, your good self included with this wonderful podcast, is trying to get that realization that we are part of that excluded group. And there is a real commitment. What we have to do is not let them think they've done it. Because what happens, and I know because I've been part of this, is they think they've achieved equality. Look, we've got Mik Scarlet, that will do. Oh, Julie Fernandez is in El Dorado, we've done it. No, because you've got to have a career path. You've got to continue, and you've got to increase the numbers. And I think that's our big job. But the thing is today, now, for the first time, I think they are listening. So it's really important to have things like this, to have chances where people can tell the past mistakes so we don't make them again, and that we keep banging on that door. So definitely this is the time, if you are a young disabled person and you want to get into the arts, into media, into anything, now is the time. Big piece of advice: don't agree with everything that you're told. Right, one of the big problems is you're new, you're told about a show, you think that sounds really awful, but you don't say, because of the fact that you don't want to lose your job. You, for the first time ever, will be actually rewarded more if you say, actually, that's a really awful idea. Why don't we do this? Do something better. Be that creative, because they're desperate to tell our stories, but they really don't know how to do it, because there are so few of us.
Yeah, so in a nutshell, you would say to anyone that has a disability or not, get into the arts. It's a great area to work in, and now is the time to push yourself forward.
Yeah, and I also think that people don't really appreciate. Lots of people don't admit to themselves that they're disabled. They have illnesses or conditions or whatever, and they go, oh, I'm not one of those. And it's like, no, you are. You know, be part of our gang. Be proud of the difference that makes you look at life differently to other people, because that's what will give you your creative edge. Embrace it. And now is the time, for the first time ever, I think, where you can be open and out and proud. Take a leaf out of lots of my gay friends' books. You know, I was, you know, mixed quite heavily on the gay scene in the 80s and 90s. And there was a big movement to be proud of who you are. We, the disabled community, now need to do the same. And thankfully, I think the arts especially are a place that is listening.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Mik. It's been a really interesting conversation, and we've learned a lot more about you. And
yes,
but some great advice too. Thank you so much for that. Hope to see lots more of you in the future. Thank you for your time today, and good luck with everything you're doing in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much.